Hey, church family. As we turn to Matthew 7 today, Jesus concludes his Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 7, Jesus addresses several topics. He talks about judging. He talks about asking and seeking and knocking. He talks about the golden rule. He talks about trees and bearing fruit. He talks about whether or not we know him. But as he concludes the chapter and as he concludes his sermon, he concludes with a parable. He says that there are two types of people who will hear this sermon, hear this teaching. There's one group that they are like a person who built their house on a rock, on a firm foundation. And when the rains come and the winds blow, that house stands firm because it was built on the rock. But then there's another group of people who hear this sermon. They build their house on the sand. And when the rains come and the winds blow, their house falls. And the fall of their house is great because it was built on sand. So you have these two different types of people. Both have heard Jesus' sermon, Jesus' teaching, but they end up in two different places. What's the difference? Well, Jesus tells us. In verse 24, he says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock." And then in verse 26, "And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand." Both groups heard Jesus' teaching, but one group acted on it. And the group that acted on it built their life on a firm foundation. Over the last 3 days, we've read through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Throughout this month, we're going to read through Jesus' teaching. We're going to hear what he has to say to us. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how are we going to respond? Are we going to act on what he calls us to do? I encourage you to talk with him about that as you spend time with Jesus today. Enjoy your day.